Sam Horn has been drafted by the Los Angeles Dodgers, and why this is actually a good situation for Mizzou football.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball, and not a whole terribly lot of newsworthy stuff has been happening at SEC Media Day so far, if you ask me. Though, maybe that's my bias as a Missouri fan, obviously waiting for Thursday here as we get Eli Drinkwitz and company up to the podium. But I'll say this, the Big Ten and SEC is still very much at odds over the college football playoff format. Also later in the show, got some real positive Ben Askren updates for you, though he definitely still has a long way to go in his recovery. Before we start the show, I do want to remind you today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first live event purchase. And I want to start off today with what I think is the biggest news so far around Missouri football here the last couple days, and that's that Sam Horn was drafted by the Los Angeles Dodgers yesterday in the MLB draft, though much later than I think many people might have expected. In the 17th round, 525th overall by the Dodgers. That's much, much, much later, obviously, than the second or third round type of range that I had seen Horn projected around for the last couple of years or so. And that isn't meant as a big-time criticism of the mock drafters, by the way. It's understandable in the MLB draft, when you're looking at the just massive amounts of players that they have to get through, it is understandable that the range can change so much, especially in that sport where, unlike the NBA draft and the NFL draft, 99% of the time when guys are getting drafted, well, that's the year that they want to go into pro football or pro basketball. That isn't necessarily the case, as we've seen many, many times. Guys drafted in high school opt to end up going into college anyway, and vice versa. So it's just not as obvious. And I think the point here is that it's quite obvious now, with the benefit of hindsight, that Sam Horn's going to be sticking around Missouri football. There was no chance that, well, he wasn't going to explore his options as a football player, it would seem. And obviously, the injury concerns around Horn, he coming off an entire miss of 2024 with Tommy John surgery. Well, obviously, all of this had an impact on his value. What, again, this means for Missouri, that he's going to be sticking around for the game of football for at least this entire season, which is good news on a couple different levels, not only for competition at the starting spot, but also at that backup spot as well, where other than Matt Zollers, you don't really have another scholarship caliber quarterback on the roster that I'm aware of. And also, you're talking about, obviously, the backup quarterback position, as Missouri learned last year, can obviously come into play at any time. Plus, 17th round, another big factor here for Missouri. That's not big money. We're not talking about a six-figure type of signing bonus, that type of deal. I'd say it's safe to say that Sam has earned significantly more with his NIL packages, whatever you want to call them, playing college football here in recent years, and baseball as well with Missouri. The point is he's getting a decent chunk of change, I should say, to continue, and has been gotten that to play college football and baseball. So what does that tell you? Well, he can stick around for a lot longer than I think previous generations of players could. So I think even if the thing is, it's possible that Horn could sign this contract with the Dodgers. I'm guessing that he won't. He'll have a chance to go into the draft again next season and improve his his stock quite a bit if he's just simply healthy and throws maybe a complete type of season with Missouri on the diamond next season. But again, even if he does sign with the Dodgers, don't worry, because that does not, again, that's a different sport. That does not preclude him from playing football for the Missouri Tigers. And since I brought up SEC Media Days, unfortunately, I was not able to join many of my Locked On podcast colleagues down in Atlanta for the Media Days. But like I said, not a ton has seemed to have happened down there so far. But one thing that is happening, a lot of votes being tabulated for the winners of the league, all conference, all that kind of stuff. So since I wasn't able to make the journey down to Atlanta, I do want to give my 2 cents on what I think is, this would be my poll. Let's put it that way. If I had to vote 1 through 16 for the best teams in this conference, this is how I would have it play out. I've got it on your screen here for those of you on YouTube. For those of you on audio, I will certainly narrate along here. And at the very top of the league, I think there's a pretty obvious tier of 3 teams. And it seems like, well, for once, I agree with the conventional wisdom, everybody. Georgia, Texas, and Alabama. And that is the order that I would have those 3 teams. To me, maybe I could even argue I should have Georgia in a tier by itself, because I just think the Bulldogs are the surest thing in the conference to be a top 5 elite type of team in the country. If Georgia doesn't make the playoffs, I'll genuinely be really surprised. And I don't know that I can say that about any other team. Texas, I'd be a little surprised, but Georgia, I'd be really, really surprised. Alabama, I'm prepared for just about anything. I think on paper, the Crimson Tide are in a much better spot to have a big season this year in the second year with Kalen DeBoer. Although the quarterback position is a question mark. Ty Simpson, a guy who's been around for a while, doesn't have a ton of experience as an actual lead guy at the position. So I just have question marks there to me, even though Georgia also has another quarterback. Again, the same coach, though, Kirby Smart. That program is so established at this point. Once again, I'd just be shocked if the Dogs weren't one of the elite teams in the country once again. And then the second tier, now we're talking Ole Miss, Missouri, South Carolina, LSU, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas A&M, Florida, and Auburn. Yes, I can put pretty much all of those teams into one basket. I really can. Because I can see, sort of like Alabama, but maybe to a lesser extent, I can see all of these teams competing for a spot in the college football playoff. And I could also see, well, a couple of these teams like Florida and Auburn, at the very worst case, at the bottom end of that scenario, the worst case scenario, maybe they're looking for a new coach at the end of the season. Realistically, I can't say that about too many other teams in the SEC, though I could probably make the case for Oklahoma and Brent Venables and also Brian Kelly at LSU. Those would be two pretty stunning outcomes, but I do think they're at least in the realm of possibility, whereas Eli Drinkwitz, Frank Beamer at South Carolina, Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss, there's no actual scenario outside of, let's just say there's no football-only related scenario where these guys could find themselves out of a job. And at the same time, I could say the same thing about Billy Napier. You know what? Maybe there are more guys potentially on the SEC hot seat as I talk this out aloud here than I initially thought. But speaking of Florida and Billy Napier, again, I think DJ Lagway, you've just got a real talent at quarterback there that is also has some question marks too with a lack of experience and a possible shoulder injury as well. I just think you're looking at, 3, 6, 9 teams there right in the middle of the league, including Missouri, that I think are, again, potential playoff contenders or a potential bust as well. I tend to be more on the optimistic side with Ole Miss, Missouri, and South Carolina. Those are kind of my top 3 in that order. And yes, the schedule, folks, does factor into that a little bit. But those are, I think, the 3 I'm most confident in of that middle tier. And then finally, Vanderbilt, Arkansas, and Kentucky. Three teams that I think could have decent seasons. I just can't see a scenario where any of them are actual contenders. And then finally, Mississippi State, a program that really just seems to be spinning its wheels right now. I'm not really sure what the direction there is, unfortunately, in a post-Mike Leach world. And since getting back into town yesterday from Nashville last week, well, I've been able to mess around a little bit with the College Football 26, the new video game on PlayStation 5. And I have to say, all the evaluations on that game are pretty revealing sometimes. I trust a lot of them about as much as I trust, some of the bigger names in this industry. So let's talk about some insights from that game, and also, yes, the Big Ten and the SEC at odds once again seem to be at yet another impasse with the future of college football. Let's break it all down here in the next segment. First, though, today's episode is, of course, brought to you by Gametime. And have you ever decided at the last minute to head to the ballpark with some friends or family? Well, maybe it's just one of those beautiful days and you just realize, I gotta get a hot dog and a beer, that type of deal. Well, the beautiful thing about Gametime is the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on, again, said hot dog and beer. And Gametime makes buying tickets fast and simple. That's the best part. You want to spend all day scrolling on your phone for yet another reason. Let's get in, let's get out, let's get the best deals. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. You know, a few weeks ago on the SEC squad, when I said that I thought Ahmad Hardy is going to be the best running back in the Southeastern Conference this year, I was expecting more disagreement from my fellow hosts, but in fact, I got mostly a round of applause and a pat on the back saying, hey, nice take, John. You're ahead of the curve on that one, it would seem, especially from, like Zach Blackerby had locked on Auburn. Not only did Auburn play against Ahmad Hardy and his previous Louisiana Monroe ball club last year, but also the other Tigers, the War Eagle type Tigers, they wanted Hardy as well, and Missouri was fortunately able to beat him out. And apparently, College Football 26 agrees with me at the moment as well. You look at the best running backs in the country, Ahmad Hardy is definitely among them in the video games ratings, and in fact, he is the highest rated running back on the game in the Southeastern Conference right now. So indeed, if you listen to Locked On Mizzou, you are ahead of the curve as per usual. But some other insights there, and again, all of these rankings are not perfect by any means, but any of this stuff is very subjective. All of the pro football focus stuff, whatever you want to look at, just the absolute volume of football players that you have to evaluate throughout the country. You know, there's 65 or so odd, I don't know, maybe more than that, who play regularly just on Missouri alone. So the idea that any one person or one group is going to have the perfect formula here for evaluating players, the NFL would definitely love to meet that person or group. Let's put it that way. But with all of those qualifiers out of the way, I will say it's not just Ahmad Hardy that this game loves, but Caden Green tied for the highest ranked left guard in the entire country. By the way, Connor Tollison, your 9th best center in the country, and many other players like Dalen Carnell and Jalen Catalon, the safety transfer, have a bunch of high ratings as well. Kevin Coleman is very effective and highly rated in the game. Bo Prabula, not as much. He's more sort of middling in the quarterback range, though again, playing with him on the game, he's pretty effective. Maybe I'm just good with the sticks. I don't know what to tell you there. But basically, again, I'll trust this game's grades about as much as I'll trust anyone's scouting grades, which is, hey, that's interesting, not certainly gospel whatsoever. And when it comes to SEC Media Days, well, Greg Sankey was making sure everybody knows that, hey, the SEC has everybody's bit as much power as the Big Ten, and he was definitely pushing his weight around a little bit yesterday, I would say. But to the point, the crux of the argument here is that basically, well, what the Big Ten and the SEC agree on is that in a perfect world, we would go to 16 teams. But what the Big Ten prefers is a model that rewards conferences with guaranteed spots and basically play-in games that determine them. So in addition to what has been the Big Ten championship game, the SEC championship game, well, now you could have semifinals, quarterfinals, that type of deal, or maybe the top two teams, for instance, would automatically get into the playoff. But then the next two, the 3 and 4 seeds, well, that would be decided when the third best team in the SEC plays the 6 and the 4 plays the 5. If that was a little bit complicated, well, it's not that complicated, but it does require enough explanation that your casual fans may be a tiny bit turned off by it, I suppose. I'm talking more about, your grandma, that type of fan, not necessarily the people who are listening to my program 5 days a week. God bless you if they are. But the main point here is that regardless of what you think about it, the SEC, well, most of this conference, Sankey, they all seem to be aligned that they prefer a 16-team format that basically, hey, the 5 conferences, the 5 highest-ranked conference champions get a bid, and then there's 11 at-large bids. None of them are guaranteed to any of the conference. I think Sankey feels like at this point, well, heck, give us 11 at-large bids, and I think the SEC will get a huge chunk of them every season to the point where, well, why do I want to give the ACC and the Big 12 2 automatic bids? Hey, if they deserve those, then get them in the at-large, that type of deal. If there happens to be a season where 3 or 4 Big 12 teams have earned that spot, well, then great, but why guarantee them? I think that's Sankey's point, and not from his perspective, from the SEC's perspective, that's his job, is to always pump and push the conference's interests. I totally understand, and basically at the end of the day, Sankey is saying, hey, whatever, bro. We can still stay at 12 teams. There's nothing that says we can't just keep rolling over the current 12-team format into the future here. And frankly, I'm all for that. We've only had 1 year of the 12-team playoff. We're going to tweak it a little bit this coming season. Let's maybe see how the 12-teamer feels for a few seasons before we immediately blow it up to 16. That's how I've felt really for the entire time of this process. And some really positive updates on Missouri legend Ben Askren, who again still has a long way to go in his recovery, but has made significant progress, and possibly with a little bit of help from an unlikely source, Jake Paul, as well. Let's talk about that after these quick words. And Mizzou legend Ben Askren, well, as all of you, I believe, know, has had some really major health troubles here over the last few weeks, to the point where, well, I think a lot of us were concerned he wasn't possibly going to make it. I think that's just the brutally honest truth about the situation, where Askren had developed a staph infection, developed pneumonia, had complications that led to him needing a double lung transplant. Well, evidently, at least so far so good on that double lung transplant. Askren put out a couple videos of himself addressing the fans, and while obviously if you watch those videos, he looks very, very weakened. He looks light. As you might expect, his breathing and just speech is labored. But again, considering where he was a few weeks ago, I actually thought it was incredibly encouraging to see this. And, well, Ben Askren a few years ago, while he was known as a wrestler and an MMA fighter, actually did a boxing match against Jake Paul, who has become, well, the biggest name in boxing, quite honestly. Whether you like Jake Paul or you don't, that's just a fact. And I'll be honest with you, I'm still not even totally sure why Jake Paul is famous before the boxing thing. I realize him and his brother Logan have a YouTube show and all that good stuff. They're influencers. I just don't really understand. This is the old man part of me of just not quite understanding that particular thing. But regardless, I know Jake Paul has a lot of haters out there. And well, Jake Paul recently tweeted out about his former opponent in Ben Askren there in the ring. Shout out to Ben Ascarin. Just proved he's one of the toughest fighters of all time. Well, another UFC legend, I would say, referee Big John McCarthy, a few hours later, quote tweeted Jake Paul's sentiment there to Askren and said, "You are correct, Jake." But let me say a huge shout out to Jake Paul, who saw a former opponent in trouble and being screwed over by his so-called medical insurance company. You showed the quality of your character by helping with the financial strain placed upon Ben and his family. Everyone who cares about Ben owes you a huge thank you. So indeed, thank you to Jake Paul. That's really an incredible thing to hear. And at the risk of ruining Jake Paul's heel gimmick and image out there, I guess he's not the worst person on the entire planet, as some have led me to believe. Again, have led me to believe. This is the 42-year-old man in me not knowing all that much about Jake Paul. I know his brother Logan's a pretty good WWE wrestler. There's something I know a thing or two about. But regardless, just great news there on Ben Askren. Hopefully the news continues to be positive going forward here because, well, obviously double lung transplant, that is a serious deal. And by the way, the latest update and message that Ben Askren wanted to say to everybody is that, hey, I'm not feeling sorry for myself. There was a moment where I said, what the heck? Again, I'm paraphrasing here, but basically he said, I never smoked a cigarette in my life. I never smoked cannabis or anything like that. You know, naturally, the human thing is to just have that why me element there. But you know what? He said the heck with that. He already pushed it away, he said, and he just refuses to feel sorry for himself. So I, for one, found that to be an inspiring message from Ben Askren and just a positive note to go out on, that young man hopefully is going to be okay here, at least as okay as you can be after just having, well, a couple of your lungs pulled out and some new ones put in. Can you believe that humans are even capable of that type of thing? Pretty astonishing, but hey, it's always astonishing that so many people listen to Locked On Mizzou as well. So thanks for making that happen for me, and thanks for making this show your first listen today. Why don't you check out the portal for your second listen today? Brian Smith has all the good stuff. You know what? I've got to get Brian into the show. Let's just say this week. How about it? Let's get Brian into the show. I've been meaning to talk to him about Missouri high school recruiting lately. What's up? We're 15th in the league. Should I be panicking? Should I be calm because of the portal? Let's find out what Brian has to say later this week. And until then, I'm John Miller. This has been Locked On Mizzou.